badger pelt and face paint. This is a prominent QAnon crackpot and longtime Trump supporter. He was taken into custody on Saturday, charged with violent entry into the U.S. Capitol. This morning, I am very hard-pressed to see what this mad minotaur has to teach us. How about this guy? He left a nasty note in Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office and stole some of her mail. I guess he didn't know that's a federal crime. I'm not sure we should take any pointers from him. Are we supposed to listen to members of this bloodthirsty mob beating people with bats and clubs? For the record, I don't think the arsonists and vandals who caused damage in Portland and other cities this summer should be listened to either. But I don't hear any political leaders saying they should be. The violent mob that descended on the Capitol had their chance to have a say on Wednesday. Hundreds of journalists with cameras were positioned along the protest route to capture the rioters' feelings and anger. But instead of speaking out peacefully, they broke windows, they scaled walls, they carried a Confederate flag into the Capitol Rotunda, they defecated in the halls of the U.S. Capitol, and they killed a police officer. If you're a regular watcher of New Day, you know that for the past 5 years, we've put together voter panels with dozens of Trump supporters for the express purpose of listening to their feelings and motivation. I've always believed in hearing and understanding all sides. But the problem with listening to Trump supporters today versus 4 years ago is how many of them have become delusional and untethered from reality. According to Reuters, 68% of Trump supporters believe the 2020 election was, quote, rigged and stolen, despite the dozens of Trump-appointed judges and Republican secretaries of state who tell them otherwise. 37% of Trump supporters believe the QAnon conspiracy theory that a ring of satanic pedophiles have taken over the U.S. government. I still believe in hearing all sides, except the crazy, violent side. And if you're someone who keeps falling for these lies, you have also lost your right to be heard. By the way, there are also 3 networks and dozens of online sites devoted almost exclusively to amplifying President Trump's nonsense. So spare us, Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Mo Brooks, and anyone else who thinks that somehow Trump supporters have been silenced. It's not true. We've heard them loudly and clearly for 4 years, and their words led to an armed insurrection. We don't need to listen to the madness anymore. Joining us now are CNN political commentators Ana Navarro and Alice Stewart. Alice was communications director for Senator Ted Cruz's 2016 presidential campaign. I'll also bring in John Berman here, who joins us for this conversation. Ladies, great to have you. Alice, am I wrong? Show me, am I wrong? Is it time to tune out the crazy? What more do these people have to say to us that's of value?
Well, first off, Allison, I'm going to say thank you for sharing your feelings on that, because you have given a megaphone and a microphone to Trump supporters. The problem is what we saw last Wednesday was not an accurate reflection of the core of Trump's base. That was a far fringe element, an angry and dangerous element of the Trump base. And the reality is 74 million Americans, Republicans, came out to vote for this president, and they voted for him, and they have supported him based on the Republican values. And they voted for him knowing he was a horribly flawed candidate, but the alternative for voting for a Democrat was a bridge too far.
And Alice, I hear you, and the only reason I'm interrupting is because, but a majority of Republicans believe that the election was rigged and stolen, and so that's not reality. That's wherever they're getting their information, that's not reality, and I'm not sure why we still need to entertain that.
It's not reality, and I've said from the moment the election was called on November 3rd, the election was valid. We need to accept that. We need to congratulate Joe Biden and the Democrats and all those who won, and we need to stop spreading misinformation. We need to restore the integrity in our election process, and we need to denounce fully any mob violence. You can have free speech, but to instigate an insurrection is completely out of the question with regard to how you go about speaking up. And look, I have said all along, I do not agree with those in Washington that stood up and tried to oppose the counting of the electoral votes.
Including your former boss, Senator Ted Cruz.
And I disagreed with that, and I felt it's Congress's job to count and certify the electoral votes and not to challenge them. That's the whole point of the Constitution, is to put the election in the hands of the state. People in the various states and the state electors put forth the electors, and it's the people, not Congress, that should determine who runs this government. And I think that was a big mistake, not only in challenging them in the first place, but this president inviting and encouraging what we had, which was an insurrection last Wednesday.
And then you had Republicans who refused to stand up to him. And Anna, you have Republicans now, like your Senator, Marco Rubio, who is standing up and saying, gosh, impeachment, it just gets in the way of unity. Now, what do you think right now of Republicans all of a sudden calling out for this unity?
Well, first of all, I'm in Florida where both my senators are a pathetic disgrace. Rick Scott, who's the incoming president of the chair of the NRSC, actually voted along with Cruz and Hawley to sustain those objections. And as far as Marco asking for unity, let us remember that it was just a month ago. It was in November, that Marco Rubio was at a Trump rally laughing at the idea of Trump supporters driving off Biden supporters off the road in Texas, right? And let's remember that for 4 years, he's been inciting division by claiming that practically every Democrat running was a communist and would turn America into Venezuela. So it's a little rich for them to be calling for unity at this point when they have been doing nothing but embracing a president who has governed through division. And I want to talk about this because I heard Alice, and I think Alice is a decent person, but I just heard Alice say that Donald Trump represented Republican values. I call bull on that. I call that a lie. He is no Republican. He did not represent Republican values. He represented Donald Trump. And I saw for the last 4 years, good Christians compromise their Christian values to support a morally bankrupt man because he gave them a conservative Supreme Court, or because he pretended to be against abortion. I saw Republicans who were strong on foreign policy, who would be against things like kowtowing to Putin or Kim Jong-un, look the other way and embrace Donald Trump because he gave them the Cuba policy they wanted, or because he moved the embassy in Israel. And so he threw bones. He threw bones to this base that kept them looking the other way on the big things. And there is no policy, there is no judge, there is nothing that is worth putting in power in the United States an indecent, morally bankrupt man who has divided America, broken us to the point where we are now. And so until Republicans who embraced him for 4 years, enabled him, legitimized him, normalized him for 4 years, acknowledged what they did, we can't move on to unity.
I think it's important to remember that politics is about policy, not personality. And the policies that the Republicans represent have been executed by this president. We're talking about limited government, fiscal responsibility, religious liberty.
He's run the deficit up.
Support for Israel. These are issues that are dear to me. These are certainly why the support I have for a man that is tremendously flawed. You're coming from a voice I understand, Anna. You have been very consistent.
But Alice, are you saying you still support President Trump?
I'm saying Anna speaks from a voice as a never Trumper. I'm coming from a voice as a never again Trumper. I have supported him in the past.
I don't speak as a never Trumper. I never define myself as a never Trumper because I don't define myself by this man. I define myself as an American who puts morality and decency over any policy. We can have policy disagreements, and we've had it with other presidents. I certainly had them with even Republican presidents. I had them with Obama, but I never thought that they were not fit for the office. Donald Trump is not fit for the office, and if after the last week you don't acknowledge that, I don't know what else you need to see. If after hearing a president who incites people to violence that has led to deaths, you still don't acknowledge that the fact that we put an indecent monster in the White House is far worse than any policy disagreement, I don't know where to start. I don't.
If I could finish my sentence, what I did say was that while I support the policies of this president in the past, given the events of last week and inviting an insurrection, I could no longer vote for President Trump. There are plenty of other people that will execute the policies of the Republican Party that will do so in a way that does not create the division and the divisiveness and the dangerousness that we had last week. And I think that is the future of the party. And there are many people like myself in the party that will understand that the party will survive long after this president. But we have to keep in mind, we can take away the social media, we can take away the Oval Office, we can take away the megaphone of President Trump, but there are still real hardcore supporters of him that the party needs to take under the fold and into the tent in order for the party to stay strong and continue to be a check and balance on the Democratic Party and this new administration. And that's the important part of this, is to make sure that the party right now might be the face of Trump, but when he leaves, we need to make sure that those people that have felt as though they have been disenfranchised and not heard from, they need to be kept into the Republican tent in order for the conservative values to continue.
I absolutely disagree, Alice. I think that the Republican tent should not be able to embrace white supremacists, domestic terrorists, and QAnon conspiracy theorists. If that's what the Republican tent looks like, then it's a pretty pathetic tent.
And that is not that's not the bulk of what I'm referring to. I'm talking about
No, it doesn't
conservative
matter
people
if it's the
in
bulk or
flyover
it's the
countries
minority.
that
Not
feel
a
as though they
single
have
one
not been
should
heard.
be embraced. Not a single one of them should be embraced. Not one domestic terrorist. Not one QAnon conspiracy theorist. None of those people that incited this violence should be embraced. And I don't care if they voted for Republicans or not. They should be shunned and they should not be embraced by a big tent Republican
Those are not the
party.
people-
Those are not
We have to
Republican
go.
values.
Obviously, this conversation will continue because it has